Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about modernizing multi-tenant CSP infrastructure with OpenNebula. So I'm Jim, I'm one of the product team here at OpenNebula, and I don't normally kick these off, but today we made an exception. I'll kick this off with a bit of an introduction to OpenNebula, a bit of a commercial overview and a platform overview. We'll talk about some of the key features that OpenNebula has that's aimed at cloud service providers, and we'll do a bit of a dive on two of the most popular use cases that we see right now, with our users and community and customers at OpenNebula, which is around the VMware opportunity given Broadcom's acquisition 18 months ago, and also the AI as a service and GPU as a service, which is really ramping up lately, and OpenNebula has a great story around that. So for anyone who isn't aware of OpenNebula or perhaps this needs a bit of an update on it, I'll give a quick overview of us. So we are an open source infrastructure as a service platform. It was created around 18 years ago. It's got a huge community of users who use our platform. And we support this at an enterprise level for customers who wish to use our enterprise edition. We've been doing this for 15 years now. So we have a lot of history in this, and we've been doing this for a long time. Our headquarters is in Madrid and also in Burlington near Boston in the US. And we have some satellite offices as well over in Brussels in the European Union, and also in Brno in Czech Republic as well. We have a really good story around scale at OpenNebula. We have some really big cloud platforms or users using OpenNebula in really large environments. So, we estimate there's more than 5,000 clouds running OpenNebula worldwide, with some really big scalable environments, spanned over 16 different data centers, hundreds of thousands of cores, and things like that. So hopefully that gives a bit of a background into the company and who we are. So at the core of OpenNebula, we're a virtualization and cloud management platform. We have native support for KVM and LXC in our platform. We do a lot with Kubernetes as well. As we come to the end of today's session, I'll do a quick overview of what's coming kind of next. I know we're very soon going to be releasing version 7, as people may have seen. We did a beta announcement a few weeks ago, but we're also looking into the future as well with 7.2 and towards the end of this year as well. So this is what we are as a platform. And the reason I mentioned about 7.2 is because we want to bring in some big improvements to the way we handle Kubernetes in OpenNebula. So we have a lot of So I'll just touch on the subscription level at OpenNebula. So we have an enterprise edition that's subscription based on an annual fee. This gives you access to the enterprise edition of the platform that comes with SLA-based support, access to our professional services team, a really big knowledge base as well of articles that you need to get started with OpenNebula and help you with things. I think one of the key items around the enterprise edition with our new version that's coming soon, there'll be some very important enterprise edition specific features such as support for Veeam, support for NetApp, for example, and the future will bring lots of other integrations with other vendors as well. So it's a quick overview, and we're more than happy to anyone who's interested in this and getting the support and the services, please reach out. So just a quick overview of the platform itself. So I mentioned previously that we do KVM and LXC virtualization as default. We're aimed at, although today's webinar is specifically around CSPs and using in this kind of public cloud environments, there's nothing that says you must use in a public cloud. It can be used in a private cloud or hybrid cloud environment as well. It comes with all the features you'd expect, like multi-tenancy, monitoring, metering, auto scaling, high availability, and everything like that as standard. We have a really good message around kind of like bring your own SAN or bring your own networking stack. So whether you're using software-defined storage from Ceph, or you have a NetApp SAN or a Pure Storage SAN via iSCSI or Fiber Channel, you can absolutely use that with our platform. Same thing on the networking side. What your networking infrastructure is very agnostic to OpenNebula as a platform. We just either use VLAN, VXLAN, and if you want to use Open vSwitch, you can as well. And lastly, I think a really important kind of USP we have is around kind of our application library, the way we deal with operating system templates for quick deployments. And as you may have seen, as I've been flicking through these slides, we have some big improvements to our interface coming, and even kind of looking into the future, we're doubling down on this and really working on making it a really intuitive, nice looking interface. So watch this space there. So the core of today's webinar is around the kind of the features for CSPs, right? So we're talking the bits like users and groups and permissions, ACLs, accounting and showback features, VDCs, and everything like that. I'm just touching on this now because I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on most of these in just the next couple of slides. But these are the core kind of features and functionality that CSPs need to give their end customers, like, that single pane of glass access where they can log in, self-serve build their VMs or deploy networks and things like that. So just firstly touching on the multi-tenancy side. So we provide multi-tenancy as standard with all of our installations and platforms, whether it's Community Edition or Enterprise. It's kind of built from a core up of this user and group system. If you're using other platforms, the concept of a group could be known as an organization or projects and things like that as well. But in OpenNebula, we refer to them in groups, and users can be part of one or multiple groups to really, I guess, deal with the multi-tenancy and that aspect however you see fit. I guess there's no right way of doing it. And OpenNebula offers lots of ways you can do this to make it really fit your use case. And even for those that have OpenNebula spanned over multiple data centers, you do get this single pane of glass view that your users will be able to log in and select a different availability zone depending on the OpenNebula where you have your OpenNebula front ends. So it's just a single set of credentials for your users, and then you can log in that way. In terms of role-based access control, OpenNebula does it really well, where every kind of user that's in a group will have its own set of permissions that you could say that I want users in this group to be able to build VMs, but not be able to download images or create their own templates, for example. This can be done on either a user or a group level. And you'll see this quite familiar throughout our entire platform, really, where a lot of these multi-tenant items is something you can configure either on the per user or per group. And obviously a group will allow that to apply to all users in there. And when we talk about ACLs, this is actually it's a bit of like a super admin style feature that allows you to go in and say, if you want your group to be able to see all the resources within all users in the group, you can configure that. Or maybe you want to have a very specific setup where users can't see other group members' items. You can set that up as well. So it's really investing the time into the ACLs can really make that kind of perfected environment for your end customers. I mentioned before kind of self-service at its core. So OpenNebula uses a view style system where you basically assign views to your users and groups. And with these views, you can customize them to say, I don't want this user or this group to be able to see a list of virtual machine templates or the networks or other users, for example. And you can take all of these items away in a really kind of detailed, verbose way. I think another really important thing on the self-service side is about ability to deploy VMs, for example, that's kind of very standard. But we also have this concept of virtual network templates as well. So as an administrator, you can set up a template and then allow your users to deploy their own networks based on the settings that you've provided them. So it's really really detailed like that. And this also applies to templates as well. Users could have their own templates that they create based on a set of images that maybe you as an admin provide. And it kind of just really allows you to kind of give that self-service functionality to your end users. I guess it's hard to do a public cloud without a way to monitor and meter all of the usage on there. And we have the ability in OpenNebula to generate these show back and billing reports either on a per user or a per group basis. So if you wanted to bill an organization independently or a user independently, you can choose what kind of data you want to pull out. This is, of course, all exportable via our API. There's also some ways to export these reports via PDF and CSV files as well from the interface. But we also integrate with some third-party platforms as well. So it's very popular in kind of the CSP industry, platforms like WHMCS and an integration with HostBuild that's coming very soon. And these obviously use our API to gather the information from OpenNebula, and these platforms would do what's known as the chargeback, which should be the invoicing, the swiping of credit cards, and things like that. But OpenNebula covers that showback to track all the usage, and these are all based on elements that you set within a VM template. So you can say it's going to cost this many dollars, this many euros per hour per CPU on a VM. So exactly what you'd expect in a platform for CSPs. Quotas is another really important aspect where, again, you can either on a per user or group level, you can restrict these users and groups from certain resources. I know it's quite hard to see on the screenshot, but there's a lot of different options here, whether it's CPU, memory, RAM, disk, IP addresses, and even the running version of these. So it can even be the number of VMs deployed or the number of VMs that can be online at once. I think one of a really important feature that we released in 7.0 for this was that these quotas can now be applied on a per cluster basis or applied globally. So you may have a customer with their own dedicated cluster in your platform, and you can give them unlimited access to that, but they'll be restricted on like a public one. So it just allows you to really be verbose on what you set for your end users there. And another new feature we have in 7.0 is about labels. And while it's not multi-tenant specific, I guess, but I think it's a really good feature that complements CSPs using OpenNebula. And for anyone who's used us before, you'll know that we have in 6.10 and before labels or the ability to set labels on resources such as VMs and networks and data stores, etc. But these are typically on just a user basis. So any user can come along and tag these resources as they see fit. But now you can actually come along and kind of nest these labels and create them within a group. So in my example there, I've created a bunch of group labels that only users in my group and resources in my group can be set to. And I put there unlimited nesting, and I think this is really important because there is no maximum really on this. It's been tested with hundreds and thousands of parent and child labels here. So although very hard to manage that way, but I think it's very common to go 5 or 6 down, which we would totally support, no problem. And I think for those who wish to use them in the old way as well, there's also the ability to set these on a per user basis. So your own users can set their own, have their own ways of self-organization without affecting other users in the group. So we nearly come to hopefully that kind of sets the scene on a lot of the features and functionality within OpenNebula that supports these CSPs. I think the elephant in the room for a lot of organizations over the last 18 months or so has been what's going on with VMware, right? And for anyone who's joined any previous webinars we've done, everyone will know this is a message that is front and center of what we're dealing with right now. So obviously 18 months ago, VMware was acquired by Broadcom, and within a few months of this happening, there was a lot of kind of challenges that the community hit, right? Specifically at CSPs, it was things like price increases, the end of partner programs that I know have been rebuilt over the time and stuff like that, but I don't think they're really in the same way as they were kind of a few years ago. I think it's quite obvious that Broadcom's kind of abandoned their SME kind of portion of the industry. They focus much more on these, top tier, top 2%, 5% or whatever of customers, which, for those using VMware as a service provider, unless you were one of the huge ones, it's quite hard to deal with the new pricing and stuff like that. So ever since this announcement was made, we've really, the first thing we did was build a migration tool, right? So allowing people to use to migrate from OpenNebula, from VMware to OpenNebula very easily, and there's some services around that as well to support it. And we've had a ton of really good feedback, and we want to make some more improvements in speed and reliability of this as well to really get it up there. And for anyone, I guess it's a bit more topical, but VMware kind of announced the Cloud Foundation version 9 yesterday in a big kind of webinar around it. And I think that's really shown even more that VMware's focus here is to bundle all of these products together as much as possible. It seems that even vSphere or vCenter right now, it's really hard to get. It's just a standalone product now, and I know many CSPs used this as and then had their own kind of UI in front of it that customers could use. But even getting hold of vSphere version 9 without a kind of a VCF or VVF subscription is really hard now. Even I read this morning that even those that have these kind of perpetual standard and enterprise plus licenses, there's kind of points in there now that the maximum version they can use is version 8, and with version 9 coming out, kind of restricts them from that. So again, it's just another thing in the big, I guess, the long list of things that VMware has done since the acquisition that really, I guess, cause people to look elsewhere. And at OpenNebula, we've really been positioning it in this way. While we do target all types of organizations moving from VMware, CSPs are a big portion of this, just due to they're probably one of the most affected, right? And I know many CSPs out there are used to using like vCloud Director or Cloud Director, for example, as that was kind of VMware's, I guess, product for cloud service providers. And there's a lot of, I guess, features in Cloud Director that you may think like, oh, I don't know if I can deal without that, or I need an equivalent in an existing platform. And while there are lots of platforms out there that have similar functionality, I think OpenNebula has a really good story around this. If you're used to using organizations to kind of have that isolated, each of your customers in these isolated environments, you can absolutely do that with groups and with ACLs to really get a bit more detailed on it. If you're used to using edge gateways for kind of self-service, firewall, NAT, load balancer, and everything like that, we have our own virtual network functions appliance that you can use and manage through the OpenNebula Sunstone interface. The VMware VDCs, you can use these quotas within OpenNebula to restrict and say that this customer or this organization or this specific user can't use more than X CPU or X RAM, X disk. Same thing for vApps. If you're used to using these multi-VM style applications and your customers are using them, we have a concept in OpenNebula called services that does a very similar concept and allows you to kind of bring in multiple VMs into a group that you can then put like affinity and anti-affinity rules on to set that this VM must always start up before this one and things like that. I mentioned before about virtual network templates in OpenNebula, and that's a equivalent, or I guess it allows to self-serve the virtual network deployments in the same way that organization networks do in vCloud Director. Obviously, there's a lot of different settings within a network in VMware, but you can configure these on that template as well. While we don't have a specification, but it must be a routed network or it must be an external or isolated, all of these can be configured as such by just the standard configuration options within a virtual network template. The concept of data stores in OpenNebula is, I guess, it's not identical to storage policies and profiles in VCD, but you can have multiple of these data stores where you can say you may have a higher tier or a lower tier and then price them differently based on what a user selects. So in terms of the actual benefit you get out of it, OpenNebula is identical there. And I think, again, I touched on this a little bit earlier around the importance of the virtual machine templates in OpenNebula, and I think what we do with these VM templates is really important. It's really useful as well. You can customize these a lot, and it really allows you to configure them in a great way to offer this kind of service to your end customers. So I think that's it from me on the VMware side. I'm sure everyone's enough of me talking, so I'm going to pass over to my colleague Hein, who is going to touch on some of the great things we're doing on the AI side. So this is for folks who want to build like GPU as a service or AI as a service platforms. So
thanks, Jim. So I think before we head into this portion, I think there's been a massive drive in the industry to look at ways to commoditize existing infrastructure. Most of us would have walked through a server farm or a data center and would see lots of hardware, commodity hardware sitting there, nowadays with a lot of GPUs in them or other types of accelerators. And the question has always been for a service provider, specifically a cloud or even a managed service provider, how do I commoditize this? How can I actually get value out of this on top of what I normally position? And, virtualization is one way, which Jim was handily explaining. But the other way, and it's one of the more blue ocean strategies, is around AI. Everybody now knows about ChatGPT and about all the powers it's with from companies like OpenAI. And what we're trying to do here is trying to give you the ability to manage and offer this type of service yourself. And I have to caution that this is obviously a concept. So what we're trying to show here is what is possible. We've already done quite a bit of work around this, but it's more to pique your appetite, to say, hold on, this is something that I haven't thought about. How can I get some value out of my existing equipment? How can I provide this as an extra service? So with that, let's move on to why OpenNebula for GPU as a service. And it's all about unlocking the power of Gen AI, but not just Gen AI, for example, video analytics, all kinds of different models for an on-prem as well as a public cloud, right? It allows you to simplify the deployment of LLMs. So it's an intuitive model platform to just deploy and manage all these models. It's open and flexible, because the idea here is, and you'll see in some of the future slides, we're trying to be as vendor neutral as possible. So adapting to different types of workloads and infrastructure. The ability to support 5G, DPU, different types of accelerators, GPUs, obviously, as well as if you're going to be running some of these services at remote edges, you might not want to invest in very expensive hardware. You want to repurpose things like ARM processors, which is normally lower performance processors, but can obviously perform as well as your traditional x86 architecture. And the idea is that we've got the support that we built in for those types of networks, connectivity, as well as accelerators. Robust, and I have to add here, secure multi-tenancy. And I'll visit a slide that Jim shared a little bit earlier, just to kind of go through it in a bit more detail. The ability to manage users, groups, quotas, accounting, VDCs, and isolated networks, right? Unified hybrid cloud, so the ability to have a private cloud as well as a public cloud, and have the ability to manage this multiple aspects of cloud, whether it's a hybrid, private, or public, through a single interface, and the ability to deploy different types of LLMs. And Hugging Face there is an example, right? Because that's the one that a lot of people know. So in the next slide, you'll see the slide that Jim already shared, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. So why are we focusing so much on multi-tenancy? I mean, the reality is that if you're a CSP, you're going to have lots of tenants trying to use the same infrastructure. And at the end of the day, the isolation of that infrastructure is going to be critical. If you've got a server, and you'll see in the next few slides, there's a few diagrams showing you, hypothetical architecture. You're not going to put a server down for every customer. It's impossible. So you want to try and reuse the existing infrastructure that's there, and try and service as many customers as possible, but still have that customer's information completely isolated and siloed from other customers, so that there's no potential security flaws. So it's a concept of secure multi-tenancy. So again, users and groups, the ability to create different users and groups for different customers, the ability to manage those permissions using role-based access controls. And those role-based access controls can either be a system from a platform, or you can even integrate with existing role-based access control systems such as LDAP. Access control lists, so the ability from a platform perspective to define resource access for either the users or the groups, or both, right? So the ability to actually define what users can access what resources, what groups can access what resources. Accounting and showback, which Jim already spoke about. The ability to isolate networking, because especially when you start having large workflows running across your network, you want to be able to isolate it, because it's about security and tenant-specific traffic. And then virtual data centers. If you've got a very large estate across multiple regions, you might want to split it into virtual data centers so that you can keep European traffic to Europe, and you can keep American traffic or African traffic or Middle Eastern traffic to Middle East if you've got presence there. So let's look at a little bit of what it would look like on the next slide when we start talking about secure multi-tenancy. So this is just a diagram to kind of show you how it would work. So you'll have users and operators that will connect to the OpenNebula front end, which got different views. You've got a marketplace that gives you the ability to leverage different applications and different tools. So for example, Kubernetes, Ray, and then obviously if you're using NVIDIA, NVIDIA Dynamo, which is their tool for being able to run these types of models. Then through a management network, you will then connect to your underlying hardware. So in this diagram, you can see that I've got two very big Dell servers that's running there. And then what we can then do is, through those very powerful servers, we can actually go and define which of these servers do we want to use, again, from a management network. And we can also go and define the virtual network for the tenant, so the data plane. So basically the idea between the control plane and the data plane that will actually go and generate and position all the different data. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is, now you can see that I've got these users and operators. Now I've got a tenant sitting on that platform. And you can see that that tenant has been assigned to a specific resource. It's been assigned a specific network function and a specific network, and it's also been assigned a specific core, right? So now I can actually go and manage, I can actually go and manage the resources and the networks accordingly. I have to stress a little bit that a lot of this will depend on your specific use case. So this is a scenario on how we could do it, and that we have done for specific demonstrations for customers that wanted to see it. And we're very happy to have a discussion with you to see how this would fit into your environment. But I think the important thing here is to identify that this is possible, right? And I think just something before I move on to the next slide. So these GPUs, because this server diagram here shows a server with a bunch of resources in it, and those resources are GPUs. That GPU has a bunch of cores, so you might have 8 cores or 6 cores, same as you would have with a CPU. And what we're talking about here is not using a GPU per customer. We're actually talking about segmenting the GPU into different cores to be able to go and define a portion of a GPU to be allocated to a specific tenant and to a specific customer. And the platform has the capability of doing that. So if you've got 2 GPUs in a server, NVIDIA GPUs or whatever else, or even CPUs, if you're using that, we can actually go and define how much of those resources can we go and allocate. You might want to be able to allocate the single, or you might want to be able to allocate multiple cores depending on the type of workload. On the next slide, just to go on, just talking a little bit about using the best open source technology to build a cloud for AI. So the whole concept here is multi-tenant AI as a service solution. So you can see there Hugging Face, where we've got these different models. Some of these are obviously quite known. You can see the marketplace where you get the tools. You can see the virtual machines. You can see the infrastructure that runs below that, and you can then see whether it's in a data center, in the public cloud, or even at the edge. And some of the core features is the fact that we support different deployment frameworks, different inferencing engines, pre-built LLMs, OpenAI API compatible, because that's super important, GPU native, so basically the ability to actually take that physical GPU and pass it through to the virtual machine so that you can segment that resources that's running beneath it, and the ability to go to run it on any type of cloud, whether it's on-prem, public, or even at the edge. So in the next slide, you'll see why are we looking at using our solution for AI as a service. And I think the important thing here is that we're an infrastructure as a service. We give you the ability to leverage that infrastructure that you might already have. I spoke earlier about you've got this commodity hardware or all these expensive devices, that servers that's sitting in your data center, and you want to basically get a return of investment on that. So we give you the ability to actually go and repurpose that hardware as infrastructure as a service. So you can go and start dividing, whether it's for virtualization, as Jim was talking about earlier, or whether it's for AI as a service, right? So just to go back to my concept around, leveraging GPU. So there's different ways of consuming GPU resources. So you can do PCI pass-through, so basically do a SRIOV, passing through the resources from the hardware directly to the device, so full isolation. You can position it as a vGPU, which is flexible GPU sharing with moderate isolation, or multi-instance GPU, so hardware-enforced isolation with guaranteed resources. And an example here would be if you've got 2 devices, let's say that you've got, in this case, 14 cores, 14 cores, GPU cores available, right? You can actually go and divide those cores for different customers. So you can, for example, say to customer tenant A there, that tenant A is allocated the 8 cores, and tenant B is only allocated a single core. So you can actually go and divide the resources. Even though you've got limited resources, you can actually go and divide those resources depending on a customer's requirement. And with that, I'll hand back to Jim.
Apologies, guys. I think I was talking to myself, but I won't ramble on what I was saying there. But what I'll do is I'll kick off what we've been doing, or what we're looking to do next in OpenNebula, right? So this is towards the end of the year. We're looking at, as you may have seen in our previous webinar, right, around version 7, we're releasing Veeam support. We have version towards the end of the year, we're bringing in other vendors such as Commvault. We're bringing features such as storage DRS and live storage migration support as well, which again is a really top requested feature of from our customers and prospects and users. Disaster recovery is another big one that everyone is always asking for, and while it can be done in OpenNebula today with some storage setups, building a framework around it to integrate with some of the third-party vendors out there will be really a really big benefit for OpenNebula. On the SAN side as well, everyone may know in our beta we announced NetApp support. So this is where you'll be able to integrate directly with NetApp SANs, and towards the end of the year we bring in Pure Storage as well, which is one of our most requested features. SAML support for the authentication side. Like Hein touched a minute ago on LDAP and how that can be done in OpenNebula today. But once you bring in SAML, it will be very much bring your own identity provider that will really help some of these use cases already have their own user databases and stuff like that they want to use in OpenNebula and other platforms. I did touch on UI and UX a bit earlier about how kind of this is really front and center of our plans right now. You've seen some I guess some updates from kind of if anyone who used OpenNebula a few years ago compared to today is night and day. And in 7.0, bringing even more changes and more improvements, and then beyond that. We're really ramping up the user experience and improving our Sunstone interface to be as good as possible. At the start, I mentioned Kubernetes, whereas we have a cluster API implementation of Kubernetes today. But we want to bring in a much kind of better integrated managed Kubernetes platform. So you'll be able to the plan would be that you can manage Kubernetes instances the same way as, same kind of first party way that you do with KVM and LXC containers today. I know the item there around GUI-based management tools is a bit vague, but you may have seen a webinar kind of earlier in the year or late last year about one provision, or as it's now known, one form. But kind of building on this technology will allow us to really bring in a much easier way to onboard OpenNebula. So when you do that initial installation, or perhaps you're adding hypervisors or adding clusters to your platform, compared to the way it's done today, this will be, again, a night and day difference for those who use that. And there's a ton of other kind of like smaller items as well. I don't want to say smaller in importance, but these are typically a bit quicker to do. Things like EVC. So this is where multiple families or additions of CPUs can be used in the same cluster without any issues. Bringing in features such as virtual machine cloning, cross-cluster migrations, and obviously there's a bit that but we're still working on, right? This is not locked in stone, but this is the feedback we've had from our customers and users of what they need and what they want in OpenNebula. But I think there's that whole AI story as well, and I know there's a couple of questions around like sharing GPUs, and while we can do that in a very good way today, but we want to bring in improvements to this, right? Whether it's a GUI based way to that users can build VMs with GPUs, or however it is, we want to just bring in a ton of improvements there. So hopefully that gives a bit of a sneak peek on the roadmap side, and obviously we'd always love to hear any feedback on like what you'd like to see in the next versions of OpenNebula, or what you like, or any feedback on the beta, and of course any other questions that anyone has. We're always more than happy to reach out. We'd love to do demonstrations and discovery sessions with folks who are interested in adopting OpenNebula as well. So apologize for the sound issues just a moment ago, but hopefully that will cover what we have today. And thanks everyone for coming.